we're right around 12 o'clock now. I'd like to, just welcome everybody to our webinar today. Thank you so much for coming. We really are happy to see and to be able to present to you and provide people with some extra information. And as part of that full financial package, we like to provide our clients with as much information as we can. And something that we've had a lot of success with over the last year or so are these webinars. We've done a whole pile of different ones. We bring in different experts. We've had panelists. We've really done a lot of interesting topics from, estate planning, what happens to your money when you die. Today we're doing education planning. We've done some cybersecurity ones, just a whole range of different topics. If you're one of our clients, existing clients, you probably are getting our emails about all the different things we have going on. But if you're not, please take a look at our website. You can sign up right on there to our email list, see what other things we're offering. We'll talk a little bit more. We'll show you some of our upcoming webinars towards the end of this in case there's something that piques your interest. But yeah, take a look at our website and see what else we have going on. It could surprise you. We've got some really smart people on staff who are presenting some really cool topics. And just, to introduce ourselves a little bit, my name is Emily Franco. I have been at Fort Pitt Capital Group for 9 years. I'm a certified financial planner, which Brad is as well. That's just an extra step and certification that financial advisors have, just showing the expertise that we have in a variety of topics, including, estate planning and taxes, education, all of those different topics. Yeah, I've been at Fort Pitt for 9 years. I've been in the industry for 10. As you can see, I really love working here. I work with Mike Flehar, so if you're one of Mike's clients, you're probably very familiar with me. And I've worked with Mike the whole time I'm here. I've learned so much working here, and it's a job I'm really passionate about, and I really enjoy. Helping people is great. There's really no better job, I think, than being able to help people meaningfully change their lives. So that's what my goal is here. I'm a new mom. I have a 6-month-old daughter named Eloise. So I'm right at the beginning of my college planning, savings journey. So I have a lot of insight from that perspective, and I'm gonna hopefully be able to share some of that with you today.
Excellent. And I'm Brad Newman. Like it says, I've got a little over 25 years of experience working with clients, helping them educate their kids, get to retirement, stay retired. And I've been with Fort Pitt for coming up on, this will be 18 years this fall. And I think a lot of the same things, like Emily, I think the most rewarding part of this is working with the clients and helping them get to where they need to be. And just, over the years, some of the notes that I've received, just, hey, thank you so much for helping me through when my husband passed, when my wife passed, when, different milestones are occurring. And it's just so gratifying to be able to have that kind of an impact on people's lives. It's a great place to be.
Oh yeah, isn't it the best when you get thank you notes from clients? That just always warms my heart so much. Wow, I love being able to help someone so much that they feel the need to send me a thank you note. So that's really wonderful.
Yeah.
So about our webinar today, I know, unfortunately we can't see all of your faces. You guys are just stuck seeing me and Brad and our presentation, but we can interact with you via questions. So as we go through stuff today, if a question comes up, please jump right in and ask at the end of the presentation. We are going to answer as many questions as we can. We also got some questions in people's pre-registration, so we're going to answer those. We got some great questions. Kind of the way we're going to set up the presentation today is Brad and I are going to do just little chat, share some information, and then we'll really dive in with the questions. Like I said, we got some really great questions. I think that really will help you understand the nitty-gritty of some of this. So back to asking questions. And if you're on a device like a cell phone, your tablet, something like that, If you just tap on the screen up at the bottom there, will come up an option that has like a little question mark. You can just click on that and be able to type your question right in. So that's pretty straightforward. And if you're on a computer, on the right-hand side of your screen, you're going to see that little red box, that little arrow. If you click on that, this pop-out will come. And then there's a spot for questions and a spot for handouts. We have included a couple of handouts. You can also access those on your phone too. Just about us and about the firm and contact information and things like that. So with that, I think we're just going to jump right in and start our talk. You know, this is a big topic. Balancing education and retirement savings. These are two of the biggest financial goals that people have in their lives. And when you have competing financial goals, it can be really difficult to figure out how you're going to allocate funds, especially if the funds are limited. As parents, it's really counterintuitive to what we personally feel to ever put ourselves first. You know, you are going to pour everything that you can into giving your child everything that you possibly can give them. But this is a situation where it's extremely important that you also think of yourself here. Education, colleges, you know, normal college situation, 4 years. Your retirement is going to last a whole lot longer than 4 years. So we've got to make sure that you are secure for that first before you can start really thinking about education. You know, when it comes down to it, there's always going to be loans, grants, scholarships. There are so many options for people going to college. But unfortunately, other than Social Security, you're not going to get any extra money for retirement unless you have set money aside. If you want to make sure you're living a good life in retirement, not eating cat food, you need to make sure that you make yourself a priority. And, you know, just because you're making yourself a priority doesn't mean that you are just completely neglecting your child. You can do both goals. You just have to be strategic about it. And that's where a little bit of planning, a little bit of foresight, and help from someone who's a professional in this can really make a big difference. You know, we sit down with clients on an individual basis and see, you know, how can we split this goal and allocate funds in a way that makes sense? Unfortunately, there is no one-size-fits-all solution to funding multiple goals. Everybody is different and everyone's situation is different. So you really got to sit down and evaluate it on an individual basis.
And, you know, Emily, the other thing that, you know, we're not going to address specifically, but this applies to grandparents too. We see a lot of situations where grandparents have a really active interest in helping educate grandchildren. And, you know, to your point, you know, I can't tell you how many times I've had this conversation with clients that, you know, if anybody remembers what it's like to fly, you know, before COVID, you know, when the flight attendants would come out before takeoff, they're going through their little spiel, and they always say, you know, when those air masks drop out of the ceiling, put yours on first before you try to help the person beside you. And I think that's a really good analogy for exactly what you're talking about, to say, you know, you getting your own retirement secure or keeping your own retirement secure if you're a grandparent is kind of that version of put your mask on first. Then you can start to think about, excuse me, you know, helping your kids and getting them through college. And, you know, if your kids are older, that's not a bad conversation to have with them. You know, that was something that we kind of nibbled around the edges with our kids about, to say, you know, this is, you know, we're going to look at all these different schools, but it's not just a, you know, an unlimited reservoir of money there, you know, to send you to college. And one of the things we talked about was part of our goal is to make sure that when we turn 65 and you're out of college and off doing your thing, we're not moving in with you. So if you've got kids that are a little bit older, start asking them how they're going to feel about you moving in when you turn 65. The answer was a hard no from my children. They may not even give us their address when they get out of school and find their own places. I don't know. Um, but I think that's, an appropriate way to approach it. And again, as kids get a little bit older, have that conversation with them.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's so important in anything that has to do with money. So often people don't have the conversation because they're uncomfortable or they don't know how to. Yeah, it applies for pretty much any money situation. If you can have the conversation, you're always going to be in a better situation.
Yeah.
Everybody's on the same page. So when it comes to, starting the college savings, you've already evaluated your goals, you've figured out how much you can put aside, and, how do you start? You hear us talk a lot about 529 plans, and we'll delve a little bit more into that later. But really, when it comes down to it, the earlier you can start funding a 529 plan or, another college savings vehicle, the better. You're going to get this, and this is the same with retirement. The earlier you start investing, the better. You've got compounding interest, you've got a long time horizon on your side to be able to weather any market volatility. You've got a longer period of time for the assets to grow. So yeah, the sooner the better, but there is no wrong time. You don't need to be afraid that you waited too long. All you really need to do is start making progress. And that's sort of the same with any goal. You can sit around and get paralyzed and not do anything, or you can just start chipping away at it, doing the best you can, because anything is better than nothing.
And Emily, the other thing that translates in from retirement is, we talk with people all the time about when you get that raise, or a promotion with a big salary increase, keep a little bit of it for you to spend and enjoy, but then save a little bit of it. And the same thing can be done on the education side too.
Yeah, definitely. As long as you're meeting your retirement goals, anything extra like that can be funneled right over to education. And if you're a new parent, maybe you haven't set up the 529 plan yet. Embarrassingly, I haven't, which is just terrible. But the way I'm justifying it is, we're 6 months in. Right now, we're worried about sleep and making sure the baby is eating enough and, all those fun things. But the 529 plan is on my to-do list for this month. So I've got a couple more days in July to get that sorted out.
We'll talk in August to make sure you did it.
That sounds great. Accountability. I love accountability for goals. And when you're first starting, it can be hard to look at your budget. You just had a baby. There's all sorts of new expenses that you didn't think about. There's the normal ones, the diapers, the, creams, all that's the formula, all of those things. And then, there's the unexpected expenses, like adorable baby dresses that you just have to buy. It's very hard. So you gotta take a look at your budget, and it can be hard. In the beginning, you don't know where that extra money is going to come from. Something that I'm personally going to do, and something that I have started recommending to other people, is if you qualify for that $300 government tax credit that they're sending out every month, this is a perfect opportunity to start putting it in a college savings vehicle. You are getting the check monthly. You can automatically have the money goes to your bank account, gets sent to a 529 plan, automatically gets invested. It's $300 that you didn't have before. So unless you really need that for childcare or something else, this is a great opportunity. The government, every once in a while, cuts us a deal. It's not usual, but sometimes it happens. When it does, you got to take full advantage of that. So they're sending you $300 a month. You're not paying taxes on that. You put that in, say, a 529 plan where it can grow tax-free if you use it for proper withdrawals, which we'll talk about. So you're getting double tax benefits. I love when I can get double tax benefits. That's great. So I'm going to take full advantage of this. And that $300 is going straight into 529 plan. If you qualify for that money and you can do it, it's a no-brainer. We should absolutely do something like that. Another great benefit of that is something called dollar cost averaging. So dollar cost averaging is a pretty basic investment strategy. What you're doing is you're taking a set dollar amount and it gets invested on a set day each month. So instead of worrying about putting all of your money in the market on one day, say a high point, you are getting the benefit of putting it in, $300 a month at different points across the market cycle, and it averages out your earnings. So you're not dealing with the same risk of putting everything in on the same day. It's a great strategy. You see it a lot in 401ks. So tying back to retirement, your 401k, that's the same way your 401k is set up. You're taking out, $500 every pay period. It goes in the market. Sometimes it buys this many shares. Sometimes it buys this many shares. But over time, you are averaging out. So this is a great strategy to use. And the government has set it up for us. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and Emily, I know we're going to talk about funding levels, in more detail, but those are really, really great ideas. And it really provides a little bit of a jump start. But one of the things that we're going to address is, how much do you really need to be, setting aside? And, where's that money going to come from? And then what other sources, are out there? I know you already mentioned about scholarships and grants and loans, and there's going to be other ways to fund college beyond you setting all that money aside. I will just say that, we typically don't recommend clients to kind of pre-accumulate more than maybe 2/3 or 3/4 of what that total goal is because of some of those things that are going to come down the road. And for some of our clients, they're going to be in a position where earned income can play a huge role in that. I know I'm thinking right now of one client in particular that, gosh, probably when their kids were, they came to us, their kids were probably in late elementary school. And I said, knowing what he did for a living and the company he was with and what his trajectory looked like, I said, you're going to be able to fund a ton of this out of earned income, just out of disposable income you make each year. And I said, it's very likely you're going to be able to cover all the costs. And he looked at me like I had about 8 heads and kind of dismissed it, and we moved on. But it was part of that conversation about, let's not overfund that 529, where there are some limitations once those dollars get into the 529 plan. And long story short, they were able to fund for their oldest, who is now in college, just about through college, 100% of it out of disposable income. Now, the reality of it is a lot of that came from, after-tax savings that they were doing, so they were able to just ratchet back a little bit of that savings they were doing, use those dollars to fund tuition, room and board, et cetera, still save a little bit of money, but they didn't have to use any of that 529 money, which they're now accumulating for younger siblings. So yeah. To your point, there's a lot of ways to get to the end of the road.
Yeah, and yeah, like you just said, there's a lot of ways to get there. If you're going to set money aside in an investment account, though, 529 plan really is the best route. It's the most tax efficient. It has the highest contribution amounts. It's viewed very favorably currently when you're filling out the FAFSA. So when it comes to investment vehicles, that's really what we primarily recommend. And there are 2 types of 529 plans. You've got the education savings portion, or you've got this guaranteed portion. I'm going to talk a little bit about the education savings, and Brad's going to jump in with the guarantee stuff. But when it comes down to it, the contribution information is the same. The withdrawal rules are the same. All of that is the same. It's just a little bit different on how you can invest them. The education savings one, that's an investment account. You choose investments that will fluctuate with the market. You have growth potential, you have loss potential, of course, too, as with any investment. But if you've got a young child, that's really the best way to go, especially if you're needing that growth. So if you're needing the growth that comes with investing, the 5%, 6%, 7%, whatever math you want to use per year for your investment, you really are going to want to go with the education savings route. You've got a longer time horizon to wait out any market volatility, and you can change those investments. They don't have to stay in the same investment for the lifetime of the 529 plan. As your child gets closer to needing those funds, you can change the allocation and make it more conservative. We'll talk a little bit more about investment options in 529 plans, but there's even ones that will automatically reallocate for you on an annual basis. Those are really the best option. Set it, forget it, move on. Like, your money is growing, you're getting it taken care of, you're solving the problem of college funding. So, we like to keep things, as easy as possible for you. I feel like when we start overcomplicating, people get confused. Money is confusing, and we don't want that feeling. It doesn't have to be. So, keep it as easy as you can. No sense in making yourself worried. And yeah, with the distributions, they're going to be the same in both the guaranteed and the education savings 529. You can take money out for qualified education costs, and that includes tuition, includes room and board. It even includes off-campus housing up to a certain amount. So there's a lot of flexibility with these, which make them great. Yeah, Brad, do you want to talk a little bit about that guaranteed option now?
Yeah, and I think, Emily, you kind of set that up really nicely, because it's really a very nice low risk option for people who don't want to be exposed to the volatility of the stock market and of the bond market. So it's good for people who are either just very low risk across the board, or as kids start getting closer to needing those dollars, needing to spend those dollars for education. And essentially what it is, it's through the Pennsylvania one at least, it's allowing you to buy credits in today's dollars. And then you're going to have accumulated these credits by the time the children are ready to go to school. And your return on it essentially winds up being the inflation rate. And for a while, that inflation rate was really nice. It was that 6-7% that you referenced, Emily. As of late, it's really slowed down. I know last year there was, for the Pennsylvania state schools as an example, there was no inflationary increase, largely because of COVID. But where this is really most helpful is creating that downside protection. And I will tell you, this goes back to October of 08. One of my neighbors, I saw him coming across the back lawn. And, if you remember what it was like in 08, till I got home, I didn't want to talk about anything that had to do with the stock market or the bond market. I was done for the day. And his son had just started his freshman year of college in the fall of 08, and they did not scale back their risk or move dollars to the guaranteed savings or anything. And one of the unique features, I guess, of 08 was that bonds got hit just as bad as stocks did. So there was really no place to run and hide. And he was, kind of beside himself that 529 got decimated. Now, fortunately, they had some other means, largely through some loans, to not tap those $529 immediately, let that account, recover a little bit. But had they used that, when maybe he was a junior in high school, senior in high school, started to move at least some of those dollars to something more conservative, wouldn't have had that issue. So not the best solution for everybody, but a really nice option from a low risk perspective.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, they have that available in all the state 529 plans. And that's another thing. Each state has its own 529 plan. Now, as a resident of Pennsylvania, we are really lucky in that we can get a state tax deduction, income tax deduction, on contributions to plans in any state. So it doesn't have to be the Pennsylvania plan. But as Brad said, the Pennsylvania plan is really great. So there's not much reason to go elsewhere, unless, sometimes we recommend the Nebraska plan because they've got really good investment options and their online platform is very easy to use. So you can take a look around and look at other states, but in reality, when it comes down to it, you're a resident of Pennsylvania, the PA one is really great. It's super easy to set up. That's just a great route to go. But yeah, the 529 plans, the rules across states are all going to be the same. And the problem with the 529 plans comes if, like Brad said, you didn't listen to the only do 75% or 2/3, and you 100% funded education, and now, your kid got a big scholarship, or they went to a cheaper school than you thought, or they decided not to go to school at all. Now you've got this huge pot of money that you can only withdraw for education unless you want to pay this penalty. And the 10% penalty you're going to be hit with that if you make any withdrawal that's not education related on these qualified list of expenses. The exception here is if you get a scholarship. So let's say your kid, super smart, gets great scholarship, full scholarship to, Carnegie Mellon. Wow, that's excellent. And you can withdraw from the 529 plan the scholarship amount and not get penalized on it. Now, you do have to pay income tax on the earnings, because if you remember, when you're taking this withdrawal, you're not paying any taxes or penalties as long as it's used for the proper education expenses on the total withdrawal, as well as all of the earnings that you've had in your portfolio. So that can be pretty significant. If you've had this for 15 years, that's a great benefit right there. So when you take the money out with the scholarship, though, you do have to pay income tax on just those earnings. So that's just something to keep in mind, but no penalty, which is wonderful. Now, if you have excess funds left over, you've paid for all of the college for your child. Well, like Brad said with his example earlier, the folks who were able to fund college out of pocket, they could take that 529 plan money and you can roll it over to another beneficiary, which is great benefit. You can do it between siblings, it can be cousins, it can even be a parent. So if your kid finishes school, you've paid all their bills, and then you decide, I'd like to go to law school now. Hey, there you go, 529 plan money. Pay the law school bills. Great. There's all sorts of flexibility there, which is really fantastic. And obviously, like, you don't have any more kids to roll the money over to. You don't have family members that need it. You can take it out, but you're going to be hit with penalties. And that's just something, there's no way around. So if you're looking at a situation where you're trying to balance retirement and college savings, and you're hesitant to throw it all in a 529 plan for those reasons, you're not sure your kid's going to use it, you're worried about your own retirement, there are some smart strategies you can use here. Now, one of them is the Roth IRA. So Roth IRAs are great for a multitude of reasons, but one of the really great things you can do here is you can fund a Roth IRA. Even if you're taking in a 401k plan, you can set separate money aside in a Roth, and that's $6,000 contribution limit. And it could grow. You pay income tax on the deposit, but you don't pay any tax on the withdrawal. So when it comes time to make withdrawals, you're tax and penalty free if you're over 59 and a half, and you're also tax and penalty free if you're using this money for education and it's been in the account for 5 years. So this is a little bit more, there's a little bit more strategy here. I know I was talking about keeping things simple, making it real easy. This is like making it a little bit more complicated. So if you were going to go this route, I would definitely recommend talking to your accountant and a financial advisor if you have one. If not, Brad and I, or either one of us, would be super happy to talk to you about it. But it's a really nice loophole because if your kid ends up not going to college, now you've got this Roth IRA money that you can use for retirement, and you're kind of covering both goals without really being sure what the final situation is going to look like. So that's a really good option for some folks. Obviously, there's income limits on the Roth IRAs. That's why this is a little bit more complicated when it comes to planning.
And Emily, you know, if you want to supercharge that as your kids get older and have jobs, if they've got earned income, they can do a Roth IRA in their own name. And we've seen a lot of clients who have said, okay, my son or daughter, maybe they only earned $3,000 over the course of the summer. You're obviously not going to ask, you know, that kid to put all $3,000 into a Roth, but if you've got the means, you can let them put their $3,000 in the Roth, then you can reimburse them that $3,000 so they still have, you know, spending money. So just a lot of options around that idea.
Yeah, I love that option too, of, you know, getting your kid involved, especially as they get older and they have jobs. It really, you know, it teaches you a lot of things. I don't know about you, Brad, but I worked pretty much as soon as I could get a job, I got a job. You know, I working when I was like 15 in high school. Waitressing at a pizzeria. Whew, I am a terrible waitress. Terrible. I do not know how I did it for so many years. I did it the whole way through college. I dropped stuff on people and all sorts of things. Super embarrassing. But I made a lot of money. And, you know, some of that money, my parents like had a conversation with me. Some of this money needs to be set aside. You know, this isn't just like, yay, I'm going to buy 1 million coffees and new boots today. Like, you know, you have to have some ownership. And I think it gives kids a really nice level of responsibility and helps them understand the value of their education, the value of their work, and the value of actual money. Like this, you know, make your dollars work for you. And this is a really great way to involve them in that process.
Agreed.
And, yeah, so speaking of involving your kids, you're gonna have to maybe shake them down when we start talking numbers here. But I thought it would be a good idea to, you know, when we're talking about college funding goals, this is another situation where things get a little bit more complicated. Everybody's situation is different, and everybody's saving at different times. Everybody has a different savings goal. But when it comes to starting your savings, it's a good idea to think about what that goal, what your ideal goal is, and then evaluate that as need be, because you're taking into consideration a lot of factors here. So, you know, in this scenario we have up here, let's say you wanted to set aside $20,000 a year for your child who's going to go to school in 13 years. All right, so if you're thinking about this normally, you're just sitting there and go, oh, $20,000 a year, 4 years of college, I need 80 grand. Unfortunately,
Big number.
Yeah, it's a big number.
Big number.
But unfortunately, it's not quite that easy. So we've got to factor in inflation, we've got to factor in rate of return on investment, we've got to factor in rising college costs because every year they're going up. So the longer away it is, the more expensive it may be. So if we look here at some numbers, you can see that if we factor in, you know, inflation and call it rising education costs, it's not quite as simple as 20,000 times 4, and it's not quite as low a number, even though it was a big number, as 80,000. Like we're looking more at like 186,000. So you see that number and, you know, whew, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. So that's a situation where you might need to reevaluate that $20,000 number. Even if we break down this college funding over the 13 years into a monthly amount, it's still $761 a month, which is a lot more than that $300 government tax credit we're getting. So sometimes you just have to reevaluate. And something that, you know, I've learned in my very short 6-month-long stint as being a parent is that we can go into a situation with the best of intentions and it gets blown apart. And there is all sorts of guilt that comes along with that. But at the end of the day, if your child is happy and you are providing the best environment that you can for them, and you've been honest with them about what we can afford as a family and what we're looking at, you're not doing a disservice. That's a great learning situation, and it's really important for people to understand, for your kids to understand all the things that go into making this decision. So yeah, sometimes that requires changing a goal. Sometimes that, like Brad and I were just talking about, it requires having your kid take some ownership and, contribute financially when they have income. Obviously, not a baby, like they're not bringing in money unless you got the Gerber baby. But it's just having them take a little bit of ownership and a little bit of responsibility, and having, expressing their own ideas about this, because this is something that affects their whole life. You're not just buying them, an expensive toy. You are giving them a launch pad for the rest of their lives. So there's a lot, there's a lot that goes along with that. And I think having them really intimately involved in the process, especially the paying for it process, is a great idea.
Yeah, and Emily, I'm just going to say, I think kids have gotten a lot better over the years, specifically since the financial crisis, of looking at things maybe a little bit more pragmatically to say, I think I do want to go to college, but I'm not the kid who knows exactly what I want to study and exactly what I want to be when I grow up. And there's a lot more openness of saying, maybe I'm going to take that first year we've got a phenomenal community college here in Harrisburg. I'm going to take that year and do a lot of my gen ed courses and start to figure out, what do I really want to do? And doing that for, virtually nothing compared to 20, 30, 50, $70,000 a year at other institutions. So again, including your kid in that conversation, you may be surprised at what's on their mind and how aware they are of certain things.
Yeah, no,
And I'll just share personally, my daughter. So I should have said this right up front. I've got two children. My daughter is 20 years old. She's going into her junior year at Lock Haven University studying early childhood ed. My son is 18 years old, just about to be 19. He is going into his sophomore year at Elizabethtown College studying engineering. And with my daughter, most specifically, we really had a good conversation with her to say, yes, you're going to college, and yes, you're going to get a college degree and a diploma, but wanting to teach second grade and being an early childhood ed major, what we're really getting is a teaching certificate. That's really the goal. And you could go to Lock Haven at, let's just say in round numbers, $25,000 a year, or Bucknell, let's say in round number $75,000 a year. And we kind of had that conversation of, at the end of the day, you're going to get the same teaching position regardless. You're going to be a first year teacher, teaching second grade, and there's not going to be a huge spread of income levels, for that position. And so whether you spent $25,000 a year or $75,000 a year, $100,000 versus $300,000, they're not going to give you a better salary based on going to Bucknell. And she said, yeah, that really makes sense. Now, if they love you to death and they think you're the smartest kid in the world and the best lacrosse player in the world, and they're willing to let you go there for $25,000, hey, swing away. But we kind of had that conversation about expectation setting. And I think that's a really good, conversation to have with your kids as they get older and as they start through that college process.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's a great spot to end our presentation talk part, I think. Brad, did you have anything else you wanted to throw in?
No, I excuse me, I would agree. The only other thing I'll say is we have seen a lot of clients over the years who have said, we're prepared to, going back, Emily, to your idea about quantifying, is we're prepared to send you at this level.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to go at a level above that, from a cost perspective, maybe that part's on you. And that goes to some of that personal accountability and having them have a little skin in the game, so to speak. So I guess kind of the overall message would be, there's no right way, there's no wrong way. There's a million ways to do it. And it's really, what's going to work best for you and your family.
Yeah.
But we're here to kind of help you navigate through that landscape.
Exactly. So I think we're going to jump to some questions now. We've got some great questions coming in. We had, like I said, we had some questions come in as part of our registration process. So yeah, if we're going to start going through these, I want to be mindful of everyone's time. So we'll, maybe do this for about 10 minutes and then cut it off so that, you guys are able to get back to work. If you're going back to work, your lunch break's over. We're not taking up just your whole afternoon here, because honestly, we could go on for a very long time. But we'll hit some of these questions. And if your question doesn't get answered for any reason, Brad and I will follow up with an email. If you weren't able to figure out how to ask questions during the presentation, please just shoot us an email. We are happy to answer any personal or specific questions. So question number one that I have here is, our daughter has finished undergrad and there is money left in her 529 for grad school. Great, yeah, 529 plans can do undergrad, they can do grad school. They're good for any of those higher education costs. If she opts not to go to grad school, can the scholarship money she received from the university as an undergrad be used to offset the 10% penalty? So as we talked earlier, any scholarship money you're not going to have to pay any penalty on that. So you can take out the full scholarship amount. Any earnings, like we said before, any earnings are going to be you're going to pay at income tax level, but the scholarship itself can come out penalty free. I don't think that there's a time limit on that, but I'm not really sure. Brad, do you know about that?
Yeah, so that's interesting, Emily. So the timing of that distribution to reimburse for a scholarship, that's been the subject of a lot of debate ever since 529s came into existence, I think back in the 90s. So neither Congress nor the IRS has really put out any guidance on that. So it's led to a whole lot of confusion. So there's, one school of thought that says there's no time limit whatsoever. Take your time. There's another school of thought that says you have to do it before your child graduates. And then there's a third school of thought that says it's got to be in the same calendar or tax year that the scholarship was received. So I don't know that we can really give a lot of great advice. I would say, as always, talk to your CPA, talk to your tax expert. And when you look at those three options, if you're really in doubt, I would use the most restrictive option, which would be the same calendar year that the money came out. But yeah, there's not a lot of good guidance on that.
Yeah, that sounds like something that you definitely are going to want to check with your CPA to see if they're filing your taxes. They've probably encountered a similar situation, and I'm sure that they have one of those three options that they subscribe to. Yeah, I would check with them on that. The last thing you want is an audit with this. Thanks.
Right.
Okay, so next question. So this one's about grandparents funding a 529 plan versus parents funding a 529 plan, and how can grandparents contribute to the parents' account. And so the short answer is yes, grandparents can contribute. Anybody can contribute. A third-party person can contribute, but the account owner is the only one who's going to be able to get that state income tax deduction. So if, as a grandparent, you are contributing, $15,000, that's money that you can save on your state taxes. So it really makes sense for you to open a separate 529 with the grandparent as the owner, the future student as the beneficiary. You can add to that account. And another great thing about 529s is not only can you change the beneficiary, but you can change the account owner. So if down the line, grandma or grandpa don't want to deal with the administration on this account anymore, you can sign that over to your kid. And then they can be the owner for their child. So that's something that gives it a little bit of flexibility. So if it comes down to state tax deductions, I would definitely say grandparents open your own. If you're only contributing like a couple $100s to this account over the year, like then you can probably just add to your kids. Or if you live in a state where you don't get the state income tax deduction, like in Pennsylvania, we're super lucky that we get that. New Jersey, for example, no state income tax deduction for 529 plan contributions. So that's where my parents live. And if they want to make 529 plan contribution for Eloise, I'm just going to suggest that they put it in the one that I own, because there's no real benefit for them having one.
Yeah. And I'll just say, Emily, there's one, it's always a unique, everybody's situation is unique. It makes sense to look at each situation individually. There could be fact patterns where, there's a grandparent where all of their earned income is either pension, Social Security, or required minimum distribution, that they're not going to have a whole lot of, state taxable income. So it's really kind of saying how do you arbitrage that? Who's going to get the best value, out of that? And, just as an aside, we do see a lot of clients who have required minimum distributions, or RMDs, that they don't utilize for living expenses. They're well-funded, they're plenty of money to do what they want to do elsewhere, that they will use those required minimum distributions specifically to fund 529s for grandkids. Or if the kids are of college age, to fund the tuition outright. And one of the provisions of the IRS code is that there is an exception from a gift taxing perspective, that the $15,000 per year per person that you're allowed to gift with no gift tax, if you are doing it for education or for healthcare, there's no limit so long as you're writing that check to the institution, right? So if the grandparent were to write the check directly to Lock Haven University, unlimited amount of money. If they were to write the check to the parent, who then writes the check to Lock Haven, now you're subject to that $15,000 per person, per year. So again, it's always, every situation's unique. It just makes sense to kind of talk through every fact pattern.
Yeah, definitely. I forgot about that direct funding. That's a great option.
Yeah.
So here's a good question. What advice or decision is recommended when considering current 401k as a means to tap for college tuition? So my answer to this is no, just no, don't do that. That's not a good idea. Unless your retirement is 100% funded, you are rolling in money in that 401k, no. But Brad, I don't know if you have a less abrupt answer.
Agreed.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to take money out, and especially if you're not 59 and a half, there's a 10% penalty on top of the tax. And if you're thinking about a loan, the provisions for a loan are the greater of 50% of the balance, or $50,000. So for most people, the most you can do is $50,000. And the thing that really trips people up on those 401k loans is that if that loan's not repaid within 5 years, it automatically becomes a distribution, triggering the tax, and then if a penalty is appropriate, a penalty on top of that. So there's been a lot of situations, a lot of articles written about people that have the best intention of taking that loan, getting it paid back quickly, and then 5 years sneaks up on you, and all of a sudden you get this huge tax bill.
Yeah, if you're going to take a loan for education, don't take it from yourself. Take it from the government. They offer it.
Yeah, agreed.
And then this is a question, but I think we already pretty much addressed this earlier. Is any one state's plan better than another? They're all pretty much equal. They have different investment options. Pennsylvania's plan is great. That's sort of the end of the story there. How do you recommend investing 529 plans? And this would be only for those education savings ones, not the guaranteed option that Brad was talking about. Personally, like I said earlier, I like to keep it very easy. Put yourself in an age-based model. It starts out much more aggressive when your kid is, 0 to 3, and then 3 to 6, it starts adding a bond component. You'll see these in your 401ks too, those target date retirement funds. It's essentially the same thing. That's what I would recommend. We do also go through and make allocation recommendations for folks too. If you're a client of ours, that's something that we would help you with. But if you're just a solo investor doing this yourself, keep it as easy as possible. Those age-based funds, age-based growth funds tend to be the best option there. All right, this one is about scholarships, which we already addressed, so that you can take out the scholarship amount. And which 529 plan would you recommend joining, or which ones did you start for your children? And this is back to the state situation. As residents of Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania one is great. That's the kind that I'm starting for Eloise. And Brad, did you use PA for your kids?
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, it's low cost. It's on the investment side. They've got Vanguard as the underlying, investments. We've got a good option right here in our backyard.
Yep, a solid option. Don't overcomplicate things. And then, here is our last question, which good, this will get us done right around 1. If the parent starts a 529 plan, could it lower the amount of financial aid that your child gets? Yes, but not a lot. So here's the thing, you get a lot of people talking about, should I put the 529 plan in their grandparents' name because then it doesn't show up on the FAFSA, but that's also just the current rules. The way the FAFSA is filled out changes all the time. They just recently took a whole pile of questions off it. So I wouldn't make big decisions based on current FAFSA rules if you're like 10 plus years out from that time. So for now, just get the money started and investing. About like 5 years before they're going to college, you can start reevaluating, and maybe there's some smart techniques you can use. But at this point, even if it stays in the parent's name, it's like only a small portion of it is considered for your student's financial aid. It really doesn't affect things that much. If you are of actual need, you are still going to be able to get financial aid, even if you have money in a 529 plan.
Yeah, and I will say it is the most attractive asset that you can put on that FAFSA form. Yeah. And I will give a little shout out to the FAFSA people. They did it, thank goodness, before I started to have to fill them out. But as opposed to filling it all in line item by line item, you can now upload almost all of your information right off of your tax return.
Oh, that's great.
If you filed electronically, I believe. But yeah, it's, nothing but high marks for the FAFSA people for that.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And sorry, we did just have one final question come in now. I'm going to address it quickly. This is about, the market's at all-time highs. I've got $10,000 that I'm ready to put in a 529 plan. How should I put it in right now? So I understand the hesitation. I really do. But I think Brad will second me here. We are not market timers. We are not sitting here waiting for a dip to put money in. You are always better off getting it in than sitting on the sidelines and watching a run up pass you by. But this is also where dollar cost averaging can come back into play. We talked about it earlier. If you're worried about putting it all in at once, that's fine. You've got $10,000 sitting on the side. You can pick any amount that you would like from that to move over on a monthly basis or bi-monthly, whatever works for you. So if that means you're putting $200 in twice a month for a couple of months until you eat up that 10, then you have, taken a lot of the risk of putting it all in on the highest day.
Yep, that's exactly what I was going to mention. I was going to say break it up into, 3, 4, 5 chunks, and every month do another chunk. If we do see that 10, 15% pullback, then that should accelerate things. Yeah, obviously, that becomes an opportunity. But yeah, dollar cost averaging is amazing.
Oh yeah, for the win every time. All right, so I think that concludes the presentation and question section. Up on your screens right now, you're going to see just some of our upcoming webinars. We have a super interesting one with the Carnegie Museums. That's, this is your brain on money. So that's with our advisor, Chris Cheney, who is super smart guy, really fascinating. This is going to be like a TED Talk, so I would attend if you're able to from 7 to 8. That's on August 12th. Feel free to go on our website. You can sign up there. And then we've got a lot of other webinars coming up, but one of our really popular ones from last year was about charitable gifting strategies. So we're going to do that one in December. That's a great time to talk about annual gifting. A lot of organizations are matching. You want to get your gifts in before the end of the year so you can get the deduction. So that'll also be a really fascinating presentation.
And RMDs are due at the end of the year too.
Oh yeah, of course. And here's our contact information. I think we have it in one of the little handouts too. But like I said earlier, if you have any other questions that you can think of, or maybe your question was a little bit too personal, you didn't want to run out in front of everybody, please feel free to shoot me or Brad an email, give us a call. We are really happy to help you out. And, I just want to thank you all for attending. It's been a real pleasure. And yeah, I think I had a lot of fun. Brad, I hope you did too.
Yeah, I did. Thank you. And we'll do this again sometime, right?
Yeah, I hope so. All right.
All right.
Bye, everybody. Have a good day.